Some men carry a darkness that should never be tested. 3 armed punks corner a heavy older man in a parking garage. They flash guns. They demand his wallet. The old man does not flinch. He sighs and says 4 words. "You picked the wrong garage." They laugh. One presses a barrel to his forehead. Then a phone rings. Not his. One of the punks. A gang leader is screaming on the other end. "Get out now." That man is Steven Seagal. He ran the Castellano operation for 20 years. Every made man in Chicago answers to him. Touch him and you are all dead by morning. The punk's hand begins to shake. The gun lowers. Seagal reaches over and takes the phone. He speaks to the gang leader in a voice that could freeze blood. But what happens when Seagal decides 10 seconds is too generous? Follow for more. Now, let me take you back to that night. Because the garage was only the beginning. And by morning, 3 lives would be erased from the city of Chicago. Not by bullets. Not by cops. By something much worse. A name. It was November. Cold enough to hurt. The kind of cold that empties the streets early and makes even the toughest corners go quiet by midnight. Steven Seagal had been living in Chicago for 41 years. Most people in his neighborhood knew him as the old man in the black overcoat who walked slow, talked less, and tipped well at the diner on Halsted. He kept to himself. He drove a dark Lincoln. He never raised his voice in public. But here is the thing. That quietness was not peace. It was discipline. The kind a man learns after decades of controlling rooms where one wrong word could get a body dropped in Lake Michigan before breakfast. Seagal had run the Castellano operation from 1982 to 2003. 21 years. Not as muscle. Not as an enforcer. As the man who sat at the head of the table and decided who lived, who earned, and who disappeared. He was not the loudest man in organized crime. He was the most patient. And in that world, patience is power. Now here is what most people did not know. Seagal retired. Voluntarily. In 2003, he called a meeting with every captain under the Castellano umbrella. 12 men. He told them the operation was restructuring. He was stepping back. Not because of pressure. Not because of the feds. Because he had made a promise to his wife, Angela, who had been diagnosed with cancer that spring. She had one request. Come home. For good. And he did. Believe me. That is the part nobody expected. A man who had controlled half the criminal money in the Midwest simply walked away. No war. No coup. Just a chair left empty and a message passed down the chain. Seagal is out. Respect the transition. For 12 years after that, he lived quietly. Angela passed in 2007. He buried her at St. Boniface. After that, his world got smaller. The diner. The Lincoln. A 2-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor of a building he owned but never talked about. He read books. He watched old boxing fights on television. He fed stray cats behind the building. Now get this. The streets still remembered him. Every corner dealer, every mid-level supplier, every fence and fixer from the South Side to Cicero knew the name. Not because Seagal kept reminding them. Because the men he had trained, the captains he had built, were still running things. His fingerprints were on every operation in the city. And every one of those captains still answered his calls. Not out of obligation. Out of loyalty. The kind you cannot buy or threaten into existence. The kind that only comes from years of a man keeping his word when it cost him something. So when those 3 punks walked into that parking garage on a Tuesday night in November, they were not just robbing an old man. They were stepping on the 3rd rail of Chicago's underworld. They just did not know it yet. Seagal had been coming from a late dinner. Alone. He parked on the 2nd level like he always did. Same spot. Same routine. He was 68 years old and moved like it. His knees were bad. His shoulders ached from the cold. He was thinking about nothing more than getting home and sleeping. Then the 3 of them appeared. Young. Maybe 19, 20 at most. Hoodies up. 2 had pistols. 1 had a knife. They fanned out in a triangle formation. Textbook street ambush. Clearly, they had done this before, but they had never done it to someone like him. The first one spoke. Wallet. Watch. Keys. Now. Seagal stopped walking. He looked at each of them, one at a time, slowly, not with fear, not with anger, with something worse. Recognition. He had seen 1,000 men just like them. Young, reckless, hungry. He had buried more than a few. He did not reach for his pockets. He did not step back. He let out a long breath and said it plain. You boys picked the wrong garage. The second punk laughed. Hard. What are you gonna do, Grandpa? Call the cops. The third one stepped forward and pressed the barrel of a cheap 9mm against Seagal's forehead. Cold steel on cold skin. And still the old man did not move. Then the phone rang. Not Seagal's. The first punk's. He almost did not answer it. But the caller ID made him flinch. He picked up. And what he heard in the next 8 seconds changed everything. A voice screaming. Desperate. The gang leader on the other end. A man named Darius Cole. And Darius was not giving orders. He was begging. Get out of there. Now. Right now. That is Seagal. You hear me? That is Steven Seagal. He ran the Castellano operation for 20 years. Every made man in this city answers to him. If you touch that man, we are all dead by morning. Every single one of us. The punk holding the phone went pale. His mouth opened but nothing came out. The one with the gun against Seagal's head saw it. He saw the fear. And fear like that is contagious. Seagal reached out. Slowly. Calmly. He took the phone from the punk's hand. The kid did not resist. Could not resist. Seagal lifted the phone to his ear. He spoke one time. Low. Steady. Like a man reading a verdict. Your boys have 10 seconds to disappear. After that, I make calls. Not to police. He handed the phone back. And then he waited. He did not count out loud. He did not need to. 9 seconds later, the garage was empty. 3 guns lay on the cold concrete floor. 1 knife beside them. The punks were gone. Running. Stumbling over each other to reach the stairwell. Seagal looked down at the weapons. He did not pick them up. He stepped over them, walked to his Lincoln, and drove home. But this night was far from over. Because Darius Cole had a problem now. A big one. And problems in this world do not stay small for long. By 2 in the morning, Darius Cole was sitting in the back of a fried chicken spot on West Madison. The place was closed. Lights off except for the kitchen. 2 of his lieutenants sat across from him. Nobody was eating. Darius was 34. He had built his crew from nothing over 6 years. Ran a strip of territory from Austin to Garfield Park. Drugs. Guns. Some extortion. Nothing that would put him on the FBI's radar, but enough to keep 60 soldiers paid and loyal. He was smart, careful, and until tonight, he thought he had a handle on every variable in his world. Now here is the thing. Darius knew exactly who Steven Seagal was. Not from the news, not from rumor, from his own uncle who had done collections for the Castellano operation back in the 90s. His uncle had told him one story, just one, about a man who owed the Castellanos $50,000 and tried to skip town. They found him in Milwaukee. Seagal did not send anyone to handle it. He drove there himself. Alone. The man paid every cent by sunrise. Darius's uncle never told him what happened in that room. He just said, "You never want that man to know your name." And now Seagal knew his name, because Darius had screamed it into the phone trying to save his boys. He had said his own name. "This is Darius. I run the West Side crew." He had panicked, handed over his identity like a business card at a funeral. So Darius had a choice. He could do nothing and hope Seagal let it slide. Or he could get ahead of it. He chose wrong. "We hit him first," Darius said. His lieutenants stared at him. One of them, a man called Terrell, shook his head. "That man is connected to people we cannot touch." You go at him, every Italian crew in the city turns on us. We are done. Darius slammed the table. He is 68 years old. He is retired. He has no crew around him. No bodyguards. He lives alone in a 4-story building. We send 5 guys. Clean it up before sunrise. Nobody has to know. Terrell stood up. I am not a part of this. He walked out. Darius let him go. That was his second mistake. Letting a man who disagreed walk away with knowledge of the plan. By 4 in the morning, Darius had his team assembled. 5 men, armed. A stolen van. They had the address. They had a window. Seagal's building had no doorman. No security cameras in the lobby. Just a locked front door and a freight elevator that still worked. They moved at 4:30. Now, let me tell you what Seagal was doing at that exact moment. He was home, sitting in his kitchen, drinking black coffee. He had not gone to bed. Not because he was worried. Because he was thinking. He had been in the game long enough to know what came next. When you embarrass a young man in front of his crew, he does not sit with the shame. He acts. Fast. Stupid. But fast. Seagal picked up his phone. He made one call. It lasted 11 seconds. He said 4 words. Marco, I need eyes. Then he hung up. Marco Bianchi had been Seagal's driver for 9 years before the retirement. After that, he ran a private security firm downtown. Legal, licensed, and still connected to every old Castellano loyalist in the Midwest. When Seagal called, Marco did not ask questions. He made 3 calls of his own within 2 minutes. By 4:15, Marco had a man parked across the street from Seagal's building. The man in the car saw the van pull up at 4:32. 5 men got out, masks on, guns out. They went through the service entrance. He called Marco. Marco called Seagal. Seagal was already standing by his kitchen counter. He listened. He said, "Let them come up. Now get this." Seagal was alone in that apartment. 68 years old. Bad knees. No weapon in his hand. 5 armed men were climbing 4 flights of stairs toward his door. And he told his people to let them come. This is the part where you need to understand something about Steven Seagal. He had survived 40 years in organized crime not because he was the toughest, not because he was the most violent, but because he always controlled the room, even when the room did not know it yet. The 5 men reached the 4th floor. They lined up outside his door. One of them tried the handle. It was unlocked. They pushed the door open. The apartment was dark, quiet, the smell of black coffee in the air. They stepped inside one by one, guns raised, scanning left and right. The kitchen light was on, and there sat Seagal, at his small table, coffee cup in hand, looking at them the way a man looks at rain through a window. Not surprised, not angry, just there. He set the cup down. He folded his hands, and he said, "Sit." Nobody moved. 5 armed men standing in a dead man's apartment, and not one of them could pull the trigger. Because something was wrong. Something they could feel but could not name. It was too easy. The door was unlocked. The light was on. He was sitting in the open. For 3 long seconds, nobody breathed. Then Seagal smiled. Just barely. And the room felt like it tilted. "Coffee is fresh," he said. "Help yourselves." And for a moment, just a moment, everything was still. Then a cell phone buzzed. Not one of theirs. Seagal's. It sat on the kitchen table next to his coffee cup. He glanced at the screen. His face changed. Not a lot, but enough. The comm cracked. Just for a second. And that second told every man in the room that something had shifted. Seagal picked up the phone. He listened for 10 seconds. He did not speak. Then he set it down and looked at the 5 men standing in his apartment. And when he spoke this time, his voice was different. Not cold anymore. Quiet. The kind of quiet that comes before something breaks. "Your boss just made this personal," he said. "Here is what happened." While Darius sent 5 men to Seagal's apartment, he made another move. A move that changed everything. Darius had sent 2 of his guys to the diner on Halstead. The one Seagal went to every morning. The one run by a woman named Rosa Marchetti. She was 71 years old. She had known Seagal for 30 years. She had been Angela's closest friend. And Darius's men had walked in, smashed the front counter, and left a message spray-painted across the wall. Next time it is not the counter. That was the call. Marco telling Seagal what they did to Rosa's place. Now, believe me when I tell you this. Up to this point, Seagal had been handling this situation with restraint, patience, the way he always handled things. Give the other side room to back down. Let fear do the work. No blood if blood is not needed. But Rosa was family. Not by blood, by something stronger. She was the last living connection to Angela. Every Sunday for 8 years, Seagal had sat in that diner and eaten the same meal Angela used to order. Rosa never charged him. She never asked about the old days. She just brought his plate and sat with him for a few minutes. That was enough for both of them. Darius did not know that. He thought he was sending a message to a building. He was sending a message to a grave. Seagal stood up from the table. The 5 men in his apartment took a collective step back. He was not reaching for a weapon. He was not raising his voice. But something in his posture had changed. Like a switch had been thrown. Like the retired man had left the room and someone else had walked in. "Put your guns on the table," he said. They did. All 5. Without a word. "Now sit down." They sat. Seagal walked to the counter. He picked up a landline phone. Not the cell. An old rotary phone mounted on the wall. He dialed a number from memory. It rang twice. "Vincent. It is Steven." The room went cold. Every one of those 5 men knew that name. Vincent Castellano, the current head of the family. Seagal had not spoken to him in years. Not because of bad blood. Because there was no need. Until now. The conversation lasted less than a minute. Seagal spoke in a low voice. He said 3 things. Darius Cole's name, Rosa's diner, and one sentence at the end that the 5 men could barely hear but would never forget. "I am asking for the old courtesy." He hung up. He turned back to the table. 5 men. 5 guns. All of it meaningless now. Because with that one call, Seagal had not just escalated the situation. He had changed the game entirely. This was no longer a street dispute between a retired man and a young crew leader. This was now a sanctioned response. The full weight of the Castellano family was behind whatever came next. Seagal sat back down. He picked up his coffee. He took a sip like nothing had happened. "You 5 are going to do something for me," he said. "You are going to go back to Darius. You are going to tell him exactly what you saw tonight. An old man, alone, drinking coffee. And you are going to tell him that the old man made one phone call. And that phone call is the last mercy he will ever receive." He paused, looked at each of them. "After tonight, there are no more phone calls. There are no more warnings. There is only what comes next." One of the men, the youngest, maybe 19, cleared his throat. "What comes next?" Seagal set down the cup. "That depends entirely on whether your boss is smart enough to run." He stood and walked to the front door. He opened it wide. "Go." They left. Single file. No guns. No pride. Just 5 men walking down 4 flights of stairs with a message they did not want to deliver. And here is the part that made it worse. While they were walking down, they passed 2 men walking up. Quiet. Well-dressed. Hard faces. The kind of men you do not make eye contact with. Castellano men. Already on their way to see Seagal. Already carrying instructions. Darius had wanted a war with an old man. What he got was the attention of an empire. And empires do not send warnings twice. By the time those 5 men reached the van, 2 of them refused to go back to Darius. They dropped their phones in a sewer grate and disappeared into the Chicago night. The other 3 drove back to deliver the message. But Darius was no longer at the chicken spot. He was gone. And he had taken Rosa Marchetti with him. Now it was not just a threat. It was a kidnapping. And Seagal was no longer sitting at his kitchen table. By 5 in the morning, Seagal was in the back seat of a black SUV. Marco was driving. 2 Castellano men sat in the front. Nobody spoke. The city was still dark. Cold rain had started to fall. The wipers beat a slow rhythm on the windshield. They found Darius in under an hour. Not through technology. Not through surveillance. Through Terrell, the lieutenant who had walked out of the chicken spot hours earlier. Terrell had heard about Rosa, and Terrell had a mother who lived on the same block as Rosa's diner. He made the call himself. He gave up the location, a foreclosed warehouse on South Ashland. Darius was inside with 4 men and Rosa. The SUV pulled up a block away. Marco killed the engine. He turned to Seagal. "We have 8 men. 2 at the back. 4 on the sides. 2 with us at the front. Say the word." Seagal looked at the warehouse. Single story. Metal walls. 1 loading dock. 2 side doors. He could see a faint light through a cracked window on the east side. "How many with Darius?" 4. Plus him. Seagal nodded. Then he said something Marco did not expect. "I go in alone." Marco started to argue. Seagal raised one hand. "That was enough. Your men cover the exits. Nobody leaves. But I walk in alone. Darius needs to see my face. Not guns. Not soldiers. My face." Marco stared at him for a long time. Then he picked up his radio and gave the order. Seagal stepped out of the SUV. He buttoned his overcoat. He walked toward the loading dock. Slowly. The way he always walked. Steady. Unhurried. Like a man walking to his own kitchen. He reached the loading dock. The metal door was half open. He ducked under it and stepped inside. The warehouse was mostly empty. Concrete floor. Metal shelving along the walls. A single work light hanging from the ceiling in the center, swinging slightly from the draft. And there, under the light, was Rosa, sitting in a metal folding chair, hands zip-tied in front of her, a bruise forming under her left eye. She was shaking, not from fear, from the cold. Darius stood behind her, gun in hand. 2 of his men flanked him, 2 more near the side exits. They all turned when they heard Seagal's footsteps on the concrete. Darius aimed the gun at Seagal. His hand was steady. His voice was not. "You should not have come here, old man." Seagal stopped. 10 feet away. He looked at Rosa. She looked back. Her eyes were wet but hard. She gave him the smallest nod. She was hurt, but she was whole. Then Seagal looked at Darius. And this is where it happened. This is the moment the whole story was building toward. He did not shout. He did not threaten. He spoke in the same low, steady voice he had used all night. But the words landed different this time. Because this time every word carried weight. "Darius, I know your Uncle Raymond. He did collections for my operation in '93. He was reliable, honest. I liked him. When he got arrested in '97, I paid for his lawyer. When he got out, I gave him clean work. Your uncle is alive today because I made a decision to protect him. You are alive today because of that same decision." Darius blinked. His grip on the gun shifted. "I retired 12 years ago," Seagal continued. "I wanted nothing from this world. I asked for nothing. I bothered no one. And tonight you came to my garage. You put a gun to my head. You smashed a 71-year-old woman's diner. And now you have her tied to a chair in a warehouse. A woman who has never harmed a soul in her life." He took one step forward. "So let me tell you what happens now. You have one choice. 1. You let Rosa go. You put that gun on the floor. And you walk out the side door. My men will let you through. You leave Chicago tonight. You do not come back. You do not contact anyone you know here. You disappear. And if I don't?" Darius's voice cracked on the last word. Seagal did not answer right away. He let the silence do the work. 3 seconds. 5. Then he tilted his head slightly and said the words that ended it. "Then your Uncle Raymond gets a phone call in the morning. And I tell him what you did to Rosa Marchetti. And then I let him decide what happens to you. Not me. Not the Castellanos. Your own blood." Darius's face changed. The gun lowered an inch. Then another. His eyes were moving fast. Thinking. Calculating. But there was nothing left to calculate. Every road led to the same place. The gun hit the floor. The sound echoed off the metal walls. Darius looked at his men. "We are done. Let's go." They moved fast. Side door. Into the night. Gone. Seagal walked to Rosa. He knelt down slowly. His knees popped. He pulled a small folding knife from his coat pocket and cut the zip ties. Rosa rubbed her wrists. She looked up at him. She did not cry. She did not thank him. She just said, "You took your time, Steven." He almost smiled. Almost. "Come on," he said. "Let me take you home. If you are still here, and this story has you locked in, do me a favor. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That way you will not miss what happens next. Because this story is not over yet." Marco pulled the SUV around. He helped Rosa into the back seat. Wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. Seagal sat beside her. She leaned her head against the window and closed her eyes. For the first time in hours, she was safe. The drive back was quiet. No one spoke. The rain had stopped. The first gray light of morning was starting to push through the clouds over Lake Michigan. Chicago looked clean for once. Empty streets. Wet pavement catching the light. A city that did not know what had happened in its shadows overnight. They dropped Rosa at her sister's house in Bridgeport. Seagal walked her to the door. Her sister opened it before they knocked. She had been waiting. She pulled Rosa inside without a word. Rosa turned back once. She looked at Seagal standing on the porch. She raised one hand. Not a wave. Just an acknowledgement. Then the door closed. Seagal stood there for a moment. Just him and the cold morning air. He put his hands in his coat pockets and walked back to the SUV. Marco drove him home. They did not talk about what had happened. They did not need to. When they pulled up to Seagal's building, Marco put the car in park and looked at him through the rearview mirror. "You want me to post someone here? Just for a few days?" Seagal shook his head. "Not necessary. Steven. It is done, Marco. Let it be done." He got out. He walked into his building. He took the freight elevator to the 4th floor. The apartment door was still open from when the 5 men had come through. He closed it, locked it, walked to the kitchen. The coffee cup was still on the table. The 5 guns were still there too. He picked them up one by one and put them in a paper grocery bag. He would have Marco dispose of them later. Then he sat down. Same chair. Same table. Same spot where he had sat when 5 armed men stood over him just hours before. He poured himself a fresh cup of coffee. And he sat with it. Now here is what happened after. By sunrise the word had spread. Not through newspapers. Not through police reports. Through the network. The whisper chain that runs beneath every city where men operate outside the law. The message was simple. 3 punks tried to rob Seagal. Their boss took it further. Seagal made one phone call. And that was the end of it. Darius Cole was never seen in Chicago again. Some said he went south. Texas. Maybe Florida. Others said he crossed the border. Nobody knew for sure. Nobody asked. His crew dissolved overnight. 60 soldiers with no leader, no structure, no protection. Some joined other operations. Some went straight. Some simply vanished. The territory Darius had built over 6 years was absorbed by neighboring crews within a week. Like water filling a hole. Terrell, the lieutenant who had walked out and later gave up the warehouse location, stayed in the city. He opened a barber shop on West Congress. He never spoke about that night. Not once. But every year on the anniversary, he sent a bottle of wine to Rose's diner. No card. No name. Just the bottle. The 3 original punks from the parking garage were never seen again. That part of the story became legend. People filled in the blanks with whatever their imagination allowed. The truth was probably simpler. They ran. Changed their names. Started over somewhere where the name Seagal meant nothing. But in Chicago, the mystery was more powerful than the truth. And that was fine. Because in this world, reputation is not built on what you do. It is built on what people believe you are capable of doing. Rosa reopened her diner 11 days later. New counter. New paint. She kept the same menu. The same hours. The same booth by the window where Seagal sat every Sunday. The first morning she reopened, Seagal was there. 7:30. Black coffee. Angela's usual order. He did not mention the warehouse. She did not mention the bruise that had faded to yellow under her eye. They sat together for 20 minutes in comfortable silence. Then he left a $50 bill under his plate and walked out. That was their way. It had always been their way. Now, let me tell you one last thing. About a month after that night, something arrived at Seagal's apartment. Package. No return address. Inside was a small wooden box. And inside that box was a pocket watch. Old. Silver. Engraved on the back with 2 words. With respect. He did not know who sent it. Could have been Vincent. Could have been Terrell. Could have been someone he had never met who simply heard the story and understood what it meant. Seagal put the watch in the drawer beside his bed, next to Angela's ring, next to a photograph of the 2 of them at St. Boniface, taken on a Sunday morning 30 years ago. He closed the drawer. He did not look at it again. Some men build empires with noise, with violence, with spectacle. Seagal built his with silence. And when the world came knocking one last time, he answered the door the same way he always had. Quietly, on his own terms, and with just enough darkness behind his eyes to remind everyone why they used to be afraid. He finished his coffee. He rinsed the cup. He turned off the kitchen light. And for the first time in 40 years, Steven Seagal slept past sunrise. Some men carry a darkness that should never be tested. And on a cold November night in Chicago, 3 young men found out why.